Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to have you here this evening. As you know, we have our nightly community meetings, and every once in a while we bring on a guest. And, I have been watching this young lady's work, and I had other people send me some of her videos like, Glenn, you ought to talk to Kate. And I watched what she does, and it resonated with me because she can do a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes with her whiteboard and kind of give a little layman friendly tutorial about the legal or political issue of the day. And it just resonates and it makes sense. And it's so compelling that I wanted to invite her on to, kind of have you all experience that firsthand. So, this is Kate Powell, and Kate, thank you for jumping on with us tonight.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
Okay, so give people a little sense of your background, and then I want to unleash you on Pam Bondi and on the really cavalier violation of
Mhm.
federal law that she seems to be gleefully
Yeah.
involved in by declining to release the Epstein files. And so tell the people a little bit about, what kind of work you do, and then I want to have you talk about a video that you entitled "Hell No, Pamela Joe." That would be Pamela Joe Bondi. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me, Glenn. So I am Kate Powell, obviously. I call myself a deranged political storyteller and a menace. I used to call myself a menace to the big, beautiful bill because that was my beat, but now I'm just a menace to the authoritarians in general. And that is what I've become. But I am a master of public administration and a certified fundraising executive. I work in the nonprofit space primarily, but I have a lot of interaction with public servants and public leaders. And I also serve in a school of public service on a board position. So I'm very, very much about public servants, which is probably fueling about 75% of my rage towards what is happening because I strongly believe in a robust administrative state. And that does not mean that I believe in an inefficient machine. And I'm really tired of Republicans in particular, but others, kind of conflating those things as like they have to be one and the same. We can have an extremely efficient, elegant, beautiful administrative state. And we don't for reasons that are entirely avoidable. So that is mostly me. I'm also a pug mom, and I have a great husband and all of that kind of stuff. As far as Pamela Joe, and that is
And
the
let me
real.
ask you this before we
Oh,
launch
sure,
into
go ahead.
Pamela. You said something before we signed on that caught me by surprise. You said, I love bureaucracy. And I'm like,
Ah,
well,
yes,
I don't know that I've ever heard those three words uttered in conjunction. So
right.
what did you mean by that?
Okay, so what I mean by that is I love process, and I don't think that process has to be bureaucracy like we would normally say that word with a big groan. And trust and believe that there have been plenty of days and times where I have been completely eye rolling the bureaucracy, the frustration, the system, as it were. I often will like roll my eyes and say the system is going to system, and that's all very true. What I am fairly firmly planted in is that the system systems because we refuse to resource it appropriately. We refuse to treat it like a distinguished profession. By we, I mean, again, primarily the Republican Party, but I think both parties share some blame in this. And also just a grave misunderstanding by the general public of what exactly public servants do. It's very easy to point at it and be frustrated when it's not working right. But quite frankly, especially in the US, it's working right much of the time. And you don't notice that. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like when the system is working the way it's supposed to, it's like magic. Our roads are paved, our water runs. There's so many things that are smooth and mindless. It's only when it starts to screw up, and obviously in some communities that can be worse than others, that we start to notice it. And that whole, what is it, Rehnquist, who said, like, I want to drown the administrative state in a bathtub.
Yeah.
Right. That attitude right there is so incredibly, like, it's not only harmful, it's just like dismissive and arrogant because especially in this particular country, this first world country where we typically have first world problems, so much of our administrative state, again, runs seamlessly in the background. People don't even realize what is happening. I think if you widen your lens even a little bit to other countries or to communities that don't have resources to run an administrative state that is robust and efficient, you can see very quickly how privileged and grateful we should be for what we have. That does not mean that I don't believe in change, in efficiency. I am always looking for ways to make the systems or the processes that I either directly supervise or that I volunteer in or whatnot more efficient, better. I'm all about better, 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 better. But this whole, like, the whole thing's garbage and we just need to burn it all down. Like the ACA, for instance, I've been telling every rep that I can get on the phone, congressional rep that I can get on the phone, getting rid of the ACA now is like burning the house down with the people still inside. Maybe you think the foundation's crap. Maybe you think it needs to be rebuilt. That we can have those valid conversations. But since when do we destroy things with human beings' lives? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so anyway, that's
Yeah.
my diatribe on bureaucracy. I love that we have machines that have clear processes for engaging. And the more we engage, the more we oil up those machines and they work better. There you go. There's my call to action, everybody. You have to get involved in the
Okay.
bureaucracy.
So now
I think I understand why you say you love bureaucracy.
Yes.
You kind of know how to work it, right? And you know
Correct.
how to work through it.
Yeah.
And you said a lot of what you do, which is, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, encouraging people to action, comes as a result of, you said, your experience in grant writing and that kind of thing, navigating that really Byzantine world, right? So let's now talk about, one of your recent posts was, hell no, Pamela Joe. That would be Pamela Joe Bondi. So talk a little bit about, your thoughts about where we are and what we can do on the debacle that is the violation of federal law, the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
Correct. So Pamela Joe Bondi, yes, that is her real middle name. I've had many questions today about that. Like, is that her real middle name? No one's joking. That's her real name. She has decided that this was a guideline rather than a rule for my Pirates of the Caribbean people. I love to be really nerdy on my channel as well, so we do lots of that. It's not. It is a law that was passed by Congress on November 15th, I believe, and then Trump signed it into law November 19th. November 19th started a 30-day countdown. Section 2A of the bill says that 30 days after the enactment of the law, Pamela Joe Bondi and the DOJ had to release all of the files. That was their deadline. They could have started releasing sooner, which we'll get into their nonsense reasoning in a second. But they needed all the files released, unredacted as much as possible. For what was redacted, a redaction log needed to accompany the redaction. So if there was a redaction, there should have been some sort of sidebar document, whatever, saying the reason this is redacted is because whatever. It's a victim's name. It's a whatnot. And it needed to be searchable as well. Couple problems have happened. First of all, only like by calculations based on Kash Patel's testimonies before Congress, and this is based on Ro Khanna's information. I was in a briefing with him on Friday when it was clear that the DOJ was not going to comply entirely. Kash Patel has said something like it was like 300 gigabytes or something of files were available and yada yada. And then when they released their first tranche, which I think is a generous term for what they've released, it was clearly only about 0.8%, 0.08% or something of what should have been there, assuming his information was correct. Even assuming that he was way off, it's clear that they're not all there. That there's already victims coming forward, survivors coming forward saying that, these things are missing. I'm not mentioned in any of this, or my case isn't here. And also there's been reporting of files coming back down and going back up in different states of redaction, especially related to Trump. There was an issue with the search feature where if you searched Trump, you couldn't get anything. It would just come back blank. If you searched Trump space, though, all of a sudden a bunch of things would appear, which to anyone who's ever done like a Boolean or some kind of coding in the background means that they probably blocked the search term Trump, but didn't think to block Trump space or space Trump or whatever. Just anyway, that appears to be fixed now. I was testing it earlier, and I was getting results by just typing in Trump, but like they've clearly tried to mess around. They get called on it almost immediately by the internet at large, and then they try to pretend like they didn't do that. It's just been an absolute mess. Part of the reason also that we need the redaction log is there is another provision in the bill, Section 3, which starts at 15 days. So from the December 19th countdown by January 4th, 4th, 5th, however you want to calculate that, the Congress is supposed to get a bunch of reporting. There's several reports that are required in there. And that's the redaction log is the only way we would know if they were in compliance with that. So one of the reports that Congress is supposed to get is who are all the notable political figures that were implicated in these files. But if there's no redaction log to kind of true that up and make sure nobody's maybe being covered up, then there's no way to know if they're in compliance with Section 3. So that is like the law. That is where the current state of affairs is. Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are fully prepared at this point to bring inherent contempt against Bondi and the DOJ. We've had some lawmakers who I don't really want to get into right now, but they are a little squeamish about that idea, which I don't understand. I think that of all the issues, I think this one is a pretty easy bipartisan slam dunk across the public. Even it's not even just bipartisan in the Congress. It's like across all the ideologies in the general public, people are demanding answers, and it doesn't seem like it would be an unpopular decision to bring inherent contempt against Bondi, Blanche, Todd Blanche, who's the Deputy Attorney General, and everyone else who is involved. So that is the current state of the union. And then my call to action right now, my starting call to action is to bring complaints against Bondi's bar membership in Florida. So she is barred with the Florida bar. And there is a complaint process. And so talking about bureaucracy, it is very annoying. They don't do it over the phone. You have to do it by writing. There's a form you have to fill out, and you have to put in a chronological complaint and all this kind of thing. But I did it all for you. It's on my
I was
Substack.
going to say
So
the good news is, and at the end, we're going to tell everybody where they can
yep,
go. You have pre-populated everything for
I
them.
have. It's
Yeah.
easy. Yep. Simple,
So,
simple.
a couple of things. I also heard this afternoon, I happen to be watching my partner in the Legal Breakdown, Brian Tyler Cohen, interviewing Ro Khanna, and he said he and Massie are in the process of also drafting up articles of impeachment. And I know everybody will leap to the conclusion that, well, they're never going to pass. Well, not so fast. I mean, listen, you never know unless you try. And, even if it is likely to fail, that's not a good reason not to pursue impeaching the attorney general and the number two, the deputy attorney general, for blatantly violating federal law, right? And there is, as you say, bipartisan support for a lot of this. So let's give it a go. Not to mention, we've got an election coming up. And if the last two elections are any indication, I think the Dems are going to be taking control of the House, maybe the Senate, who knows, but, never say never. So I was happy to hear that they're drafting up articles of impeachment. Contempt is a great step. I got a little bit of a chuckle as an old career prosecutor when I heard Ro Khanna say, and we're considering referring them for criminal investigation and prosecution to the Department of Justice. Well, wait a minute. So you're going to refer Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche to be criminally investigated and prosecuted by Pam Bondi and Todd
Right.
Blanche? Oh, well, it's special counsel. Well, who typically appoints a special counsel? That
Right.
would be the.
Pam
So
Bondi.
there are a lot of challenges with the system
Yes.
of holding just abjectly sort of corrupt and criminal DOJ leadership accountable, which again, that was my beloved home for 24 of my 30 years as a federal prosecutor. The other 6.5, I was an Army JAG prosecutor. And what I see, has become of the Department of Justice is there are no words for it. I always, I never say the corrupt DOJ. I say the corrupt DOJ leadership because people need to remember that even though there are upwards of 10,000 DOJ employees who have either been wrongfully terminated or self-selected because they cannot endure working for a criminal president, there are still 100,000 good career public servants at DOJ trying desperately to do the people's work. Now they're making it harder and harder by completely gutting the Civil Rights Division, the PIN, the Public Integrity Section, environmental crimes and environmental enforcement, and on and on and on. And don't even, let's not even talk about how, voter protection has now gone to, voter integrity, and which is, all just another way to say let's keep the undesirables from voting. But the overwhelming majority of people at DOJ are still trying to do the hard work of the American people, and we need that in order to survive this dark period. And once the rule of law comes back into the light of day, I am confident that we're going to understand we need to go on the accountability mission and the cleanup and the rebuilding mission. And I've been saying lately that if we do what Merrick Garland did the last time around, we just completely fail at the accountability job, then I don't think we deserve to keep our republic. And I don't say that lightly.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. One thing that I was fussing at my own rep about several months ago when there was an opportunity to bring articles of impeachment against Trump. There was that kind of like flash vote that happened at the House, and a bunch of Democrats were like, no, 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 don't do it. And my rep was unfortunately one of them. And when I was railing on the phone against them, I said, like, this is about the record. This is about the record, because this man is not going to be in there forever. Bondi's not going to be in there forever. Cash Patel's not going to be over there forever. Like, these people are a blip on the radar, as far as I'm concerned. Like, as far as we the people are concerned, like, we're not going to stand for this. And but what we need the record in place to make this easier, so that when the next AG, who, in my fantasy world is Letitia James, but that's a whole other, like, fan fiction that we're not in right now. But whoever that is, whoever that person is, can walk in day one and immediately start going, all right, we got a whole list. And I think it's up to we the people to be those record keepers right now, because clearly the DOJ's not doing that. And we have the servants within that you were just talking about, who are doing the good work, but their efforts are obviously going to be constantly tamped down by their leadership. And I think that's where we the people need to step in as the actual sovereigns of this nation, unlike what our president seems to think he is, and support them. And that's why I keep saying, like, I love bureaucracy, and at this point we need to find the good bureaucrats and be like, I'm here for, like, again, nerdy reference, on your left, if you're an Avengers person, like, that's the energy we the people need to be bringing right now to our public servants, because they really need us to step in here.
So, Kate, talk a little bit more about where people can find your tutorial. I don't know if you posted it today, but I saw it today, where you're kind of coaching them through how every one of us on this call can file a bar complaint against Pamela Joe. And I love that. I don't think I'm ever going to call her AG Bondi again. It's always going to be Pamela Joe. And when I saw your tutorial, I was reminded of, I did the same thing with respect to Judge Cannon, Aileen Cannon, who had just so disqualified herself because she was so horribly biased in favor of Trump. And I did a little tutorial on my YouTube channel to send everybody to uscourts.gov, where there's a little 2-page judicial complaint form that anybody can file. You don't need to be a party to the proceeding. You don't need to be a lawyer. You can. And within about 2 or 3 days of me posting that video, we started to hear that something like 1,200 judicial complaint forms had been filed against Judge Cannon. And horrifically, I think it's the 11th Circuit said, we've stopped accepting them because this just feels like a concerted campaign. And it's like, yeah, it's a concerted campaign by the American people who are taking advantage of what you have on a federal government website. So, and all of that ultimately didn't have the desired effect of, at least getting somebody to try to decide whether she should be disqualified from presiding over, any Trump case, and she should have been disqualified. But I was reminded of that. So tell people how they can kind of find and follow your tutorials.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am on Substack, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube and Twitter. But I don't ask you. I just cross post everything over there. You don't have to be on Twitter. I know it's a hellscape. And so I do all of my videos are on all the social platforms. On Substack, I do longer write ups and include a lot of links and that sort of thing. So, as far as like if you want to join me in submitting a complaint to the Florida bar against Pamela Joe, there is a post that it was today that I put that up. And it has the video of me calling ACAP, the Attorney Consumer Assistance Program, whatever hotline thing. And they kind of lead me through the instructions. And on an overlay of that video, I have like me filling out the form so you can see how you do that. And then on my Substack, I posted the language you'll need for parts 3 and 4, which is the narrative. So they ask for a chronological narrative of the violations. And so I do a really quick one. There's also a space for putting witnesses, and I have the contact information for Rep Khanna and Rep Massey because they're obviously leading the charge on making sure this is all there. And then you sign it and then you email it. And I posted a fun little video this evening of me emailing it as just like a little, like, I don't know, justice like core or whatever you want to call that, but hope core is what I heard someone call some of my goofier stuff today. I did it to like some music and was like, look at this, it's super fun. But yeah, so Substack, I am at Kate underscore for the people on all the socials, and then I am at Kate for the people, no underscore, no symbols on Substack. So feel free to find me in those places. I send out couple times a week, usually a weekly roundup of like, here's the action items for the week. I call it We the People's Revenge Era. And then I also have a weekly newsletter of economic news. And I call it Two Economies, where I outline the economy for the billionaire class and the economy for the rest of us, because I believe the billionaires are behind all of this BS that we are living through right now. So I try to bring it all together like that. And that's what I do.
And this is another example of independent media at its best and most vital. You know, I have been saying all along, independent media is the wave of the present. It's not just the wave of the future. But, you know, I would challenge anybody who's been part of this Substack Live to find the kind of information that Kate has just provided, helpful information that you can use. Try to find that on corporate media, on legacy media. You can turn on cable news. You're not going to get this. You know, you're going to get three. And I love my friends at MSNBC. I was there for 6.5 years as a legal analyst. I love them all, but I left for a reason.
Right.
And it's because we need to be engaged. We need this kind of activism in real time from people like Kate and Rachel Cohen and others. And this is the way we're going to save democracy, not by watching cable news. So thank you for what you're doing. I'm so glad you jumped on with us. I hope we can kind of do this from time to time, especially when Pamela Joe is involved.
Absolutely. Anytime. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye.
All right. Hey, everybody. How great is she? You know, see, I draw energy and inspiration and good ideas. And what I'll tell you is really go look her up, Kate Powell. And I know she gave you what underscore and the numbers and all. I can't keep track of that. But you can go to Kate Powell on Substack and on the other platforms, and you're going to find her. And she'll spend like 2 or 3 minutes with her whiteboard, giving you like the step by step tutorial, all the information you need to engage. And that's what we all need to be doing, you know. And I don't care if people will say, you know what, there are probably thousands of ethics complaints already filed against Pamela Joe. Well, let's make it 2,000 and 4,000 and 10,000, right? Until they get the damn message that we don't want unethical lawyers, you know, infecting our federal government, our Department of Justice. So I don't know that I'm going to spend a lot more time today talking about what's going on the Epstein front. Just, you know, a couple of things that I want to touch on. It is such an obvious violation of federal law. You know, this is one where there is no straight-faced argument that Pam Bondi, Pamela Joe, and Todd Blanche have not violated federal law. They violated a federal law that Donald Trump just signed into existence a little over a month ago, directing, right, that all of the Epstein files be released by December 19th, but for, appropriate redactions to protect victims' identity and security. I get all that, privacy, but expressly in the law it says you can't redact anything because you're going to harm somebody's political, standing or their reputation. No, you can't. So what does Bondi do? Just spits out a whole bunch of pictures of Bill Clinton. Come on, Pamela Joe. I mean, we see what you're doing. Think about this, friends. It was, I think, back in July when there was reporting that Pam Bondi was pressuring Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, to devote 1,000 FBI agents to the task of pouring through the Epstein files to identify every single reference to Donald Trump. And there was no deadline. There was no legal disclosure requirement or obligation that was being done in furtherance of. This was just a dirty attorney general trying to protect a criminal president of the United States by diverting FBI resources away from doing the work of the American people to trying to protect a criminal president. How obscene and depraved is that? And yet, compare that to what just happened on the 19th. They didn't, I've heard the estimates are from like 0.8%, less than 1% of the Epstein files to maybe 5 or 6% of the Epstein files were disclosed, which is a drop in the damn bucket. And Pamela Joe couldn't be bothered to devote the time, the attention, the resources, the manpower. How about you get 1,000 FBI agents? Not that I ever want 1,000 FBI agents diverted from doing the hard work of protecting the American people, but how about you get 1,000 DOJ employees to spend the kind of time pouring through the Epstein files so you can comply with the damn federal law to release them on December 19th. So listen, I know impeachment is perhaps not likely, but I wouldn't say it doesn't have a chance because of the bipartisan support that is building. And for gosh sakes, you know, how many men, how many men is Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche protecting who are in those Epstein files, who were part and parcel of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's trafficking, conspiracy to traffic those young girls, sex traffic them? How many men? 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000? And Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche are obstructing justice, obstructing that statute, and protecting Donald Trump and all of those other men. I'm not saying Donald Trump was necessarily involved, but we know it took 1,000 agents to scour the files for all of the references to him. How many men are they protecting right now by violating federal law and refusing to disclose the entirety of the Epstein files? So it's a problem that the statute itself, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, does not have any punishment built in. I'm never far from my big, ugly blue book of federal laws, the United States Code. I never leave home without it. But do you know how many laws in this big, ugly blue book have no punishment associated with them? Now this is a select collection of largely criminal federal laws. But do you know how many federal laws are in existence that have no punishment? Think of the Hatch Act, right? The Hatch Act prohibits. I'm really going off on a tangent. Bear with me, friends. Once I get started, you've seen my shtick often enough. The Hatch Act prohibits campaign conduct by federal government employees. We're not allowed to be involved in campaigning for candidates for office. But if you do it, you violate the federal law, the Hatch Act, there's not a whole lot that can be done to you. Maybe you can suffer a minimal fine, maybe you can be barred from government service for a period of time, but these are toothless laws. These are largely toothless laws, and the Epstein Files Transparency Act is one of those toothless laws. But the good news is, if you conspire to violate that federal law, even though the federal law itself is toothless, conspiracy is a crime. Obstruction of justice is a crime. So there are potentially criminal consequences attendant to Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche's violation of the federal law. Their cavalier, their gleeful violation of the federal law with no good reason and no good explanation. If they really needed more time to put the files together, they could have gone to Congress and say, with all due respect, we're pouring through them. We have 1,000 FBI agents on the job. Yeah. And we're going to get you the files. They're going to be a little bit delayed. Nothing. Nothing. This is a cover up. And it's a cover up that is violating federal law. And they should be held in contempt. They should be impeached. They should be tried in the Senate. They should be removed. And then ultimately, when the rule of law comes back into the light of day, and it will, we're going to make sure of that by getting to the polls in just numbers that overwhelm. During the midterms, the rule of law comes back into the light of day, and these mofos, that's a legal term in New Jersey, these mofos will be prosecuted. They have to be. They have to be. Because, I think we want to keep our republic, and the only way to do it is to hold these people accountable who are trying to destroy our republic and our democracy. Okay, now that my blood pressure's up, I'm going to go have dinner. Thank you for jumping on with me tonight. How great was Kate Powell? Please, can I ask you humbly to go click over when you're done here to Substack and give her, and all of her platforms, and give her a follow or a subscribe or whatever you're interested in doing. Support her, because boy, she's banging it out every day. And somebody brought her to my attention. It's like she's phenomenal. And this is what it's going to take today, friends. It's going to take us, our community meetings. It's going to take the Kate Powells and the Rachel Cohens and everybody else who's in this fight. We are all in. We are all in. And we're going to win. We're going to win. All right, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow night, probably right at 8:30. I don't know. I know I have a whole list of guests that you all offered to me a couple of weeks ago. I promise I'm going to tick through those guests. Kate wasn't one of those people, I don't think, that you all had mentioned, but when I spotted her talent, I'm like, okay, we need to, we need to kind of get her out there so people can follow and take advantage of her tutorials. They're really, really genius. But I'm going to get through some of the guests that you all have asked for, I promise. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe later. Well, gosh, don't we have a holiday this week, if I'm not mistaken? Christmas. So there may be a down day or two along the way. Can I just tell you this? I'm so excited because for the first time in a while, I'm going to have all 6 of my kids, all 4 of my grandkids, the whole family in one place on Christmas Eve. That doesn't often happen. So I am going to be like a kid in the candy store myself with all my kids and my grandkids around, and obviously my better 3/4. So we may miss a day or two this week, but I'm determined to kind of keep at the community meetings as often as we can. All right. So thanks, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow night.